Good evening. It's 6:30, so it feels like time to start. I'm Rachel Gugelman-Hill. I'm Director of the Elizabeth Blackwell Institute for Health Research, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you here on this beautiful Bristol evening to our 6th annual public lecture of the Elizabeth Blackwell Institute. An important bit of business though before we start, are some practicalities. And I'll just whiz through these for you. We're not expecting a fire tonight, so if the alarm goes off, we must leave. We need to leave through the main entrance and follow the exit signs, and then gather to the left of the main entrance, please, if you would. There are several toilets in the building. There are some down the stairs near the main entrance. We have a hearing loop system installed in this hall, and if you'd like to use it, it works best if you're in the middle of the room. We have a quiet room that's just outside the main hall, and if you do need first aid, then please let a member of staff know. You can identify members of staff of the Elizabeth Blackwell Institute by our purple ribbon lanyards that look like this. After the talk today, we're pleased to invite you to a drinks reception, which will be held in the reception room, which is just out of this room and over on your right. There's about 700 of you here this evening, so if there are queues for drinks, we apologise in advance, but it's fantastic to see so many of you here tonight. The order of play for tonight is that I'm going to say a few words of introduction, and then I'm going to pass the microphone to my colleague Jane Norman, who's the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences here at the University, and then we'll be pleased to welcome our Elizabeth Blackwell Institute lecturer for the evening, Dame Carol Black. If you'd like to follow us on social media, we have a hashtag for tonight. We have a handle which is @EBOA Bristol, and we'd be delighted if you'd like to tweet and follow the event. Also, if you'd like to follow the work of the Institute more generally, please do sign up to our newsletter. You can do so on a form that's in the reception room this evening. And if you sign up by the end of this month, we'll enter you into a prize draw for a £50 voucher for use at the Lido in Bristol, which is a great way to enhance well-being. So that's the practical things that I needed to say, but mainly I'm here to express my great pleasure at welcoming you to the 6th annual Elizabeth Blackwell Institute lecture. And what I'd like to do, if I may, is just say a few words about the Institute and about the work that we do and about the spirit of the lecture this evening. The Elizabeth Blackwell Institute is supported by the University of Bristol and also by Wellbeing Trust. And as an institute in the university, our work is to nurture really high quality health research and biomedical research in all of its forms and all of its shapes. And we do that by supporting researchers across the whole of the University of Bristol, and we support researchers to do groundbreaking research that makes a real difference to health and that brings different approaches together. The support that we offer includes support for important research into mental health and well-being. And we're pleased to share with you tonight a new look for the Institute. So on the slides behind me you can see a new look, a new visual identity. And that's designed to reflect the forward-looking nature of the work that we support and the interconnected way in which we work. We try really hard in the Institute to nurture high-quality research, and that nurturing is at the heart of everything we try to do. We're also humbled as an institute to bear the name of Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell. She was born in Bristol, and she was the first female doctor. We hope that the work of the Institute today serves to honour her name in a fashion that she'd be satisfied with, although I expect that she was a very hard person to satisfy. Just 6 years ago, some descendants of Dr. Blackwell visited Bristol. They made a donation to the Institute, and it's that donation that now helps to support this annual lecture. So we're hugely grateful to Dr. Blackwell's descendants for their generosity. We celebrate Dr. Blackwell every year at this event. And at this event, each year, a leading and inspirational figure in health, medicine and science comes to speak with us, and we savour the words and have the chance for discussion. And so to introduce our Elizabeth Blackwell Institute lecturer for this evening, I'm now quite pleased to invite my colleague, Professor Jane Norman, to the stage. Jane is the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences here at the University. So thank you, Rachel. As you've heard, my name is Jane Norman. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences. It's always a huge privilege and pleasure to meet your heroes, and tonight that's happened for me in meeting Dame Carol Black. And I'm sure she is an inspiration to many of you, as she is to me. Dame Carol studied medicine and actually history as well here in Bristol, and she's one of our most celebrated former students. Her work has influenced policy and practice within the NHS and wider in the UK. She's been a consultant rheumatologist in the NHS, and she's been the medical director of a large London teaching hospital. I'm sure that must have been quite a challenge. She's provided expert advice to the Department of Health and Public Health England. She has a large list of leadership roles, and I think the most prominent amongst them include past presidency of the Royal College of Physicians, of the Academy of Medical Colleges, and most recently she stepped down as the president of Newnham College in Cambridge. She's also past president of the British Lung Foundation and past chair of the Nuffield Trust for Health Policy. The centre she established at the Royal Free Hospital is internationally renowned for research and treatment of connective tissue diseases such as scleroderma. Outside of medicine, she's also been a trustee of the National Portrait Gallery, and she became chair of the British Library last year. We could spend all day reading out, or I could spend all day reading out Dame Carol Black's CV, and I think it's relevant to just focus on a few other issues. She's had a role as expert advisor on health and work to NHS England and Public Health England. She chairs the board of Think Ahead, the government's fast stream training programme for mental health social workers, and she's a member of Round Europe's Council of Advisors, the strategy board of the Defence and National Rehabilitation Centre, and the advisory board of Step Up to Serve. In February 2019, the Home Secretary appointed her to undertake a review of the misuse of drugs in the UK, and I wonder whether that's something she's going to talk on today, because again, hugely important for all of us. Tonight, Dame Carol Black is going to talk mainly about mental health and wellbeing in the workplace, and she's very well placed to do this. She's compiled 3 independent reviews for the government around this. In 2008, she did a review on the health of the working age population as National Director of Health and Work. In 2011, she was co-chair of the Sickness Absence Working Group, and in 2016, she's looked at employment outcomes of addiction to drugs or alcohol and obesity. These issues of mental health are of a huge importance to us in the university, both for our students and for our staff, and I think we all want to find ways of thinking better about this. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Professor Dame Carol Black to give the 6th Elizabeth Blackwell Institute Annual Public Lecture.
Good evening to you all, and Jane, thank you so much for that very, very heartwarming introduction. I can't tell you how nice it is to be back in my own university. In fact, I have 4 qualifications from Bristol, so I feel very much that I've been embedded in this university, and it is a unique pleasure and honour to give the Elizabeth Blackwell lecture. She was a tireless pioneer, and I like to think that in the last at least 12 years since I really became really interested in health and work, that I am a tireless pioneer for this particular topic. Now, I owe standing here before you tonight entirely to this university. I came here to read history. I should just tell you I was a terrible student. I didn't enjoy it. I spent all my time doing other things. I became president of the student union, and I think it is an absolute amazing thing that they let me back in to do first MB. But had they not let me in to do first MB, well, I couldn't have gone on to second MB and qualified in what was at that time a fantastically innovative medical school. And I still remember with the hugest pleasure and respect Alan Reed, who was my professor of medicine and who absolutely taught me how to be, I hope, a really good doctor. So I just wanted to make that acknowledgement to the university. I moved on, as you can see from my slide. I went from Bristol up to the Royal Postgraduate Medical School to finish my training as a rheumatologist. And then lots of things happened to me, but I did become medical director of the Royal Free, which you can see there. From there to the Royal College of Physicians as its president, the Academy, and the Nuffield Trust. But as you'll hear, subsequently into Whitehall as an advisor to government, and then quite unexpectedly to Newnham College. It wasn't in my plan, and when the headhunters asked me, I said, no, I'm not a Cambridge graduate, and they certainly won't want someone who isn't a Newnham woman, but they did, and I learned a great deal about student mental health while I was there, and more recently, I've become chair of the British Library, which is absolutely wonderful for a woman who was born in a house with one book, the Bible. So it's an interesting journey, but this evening I'm really going to concentrate on those parts which were related to me getting interested in health and work. I really had a light bulb moment when I was president of the Royal College of Physicians. We looked after a faculty of occupational medicine, and I started to know the people there, the president of that faculty, and he asked me to give the annual lecture on what do physicians do for occupational health. Well, it was a very difficult lecture to give because, quite frankly, physicians did very little, but I had to get interested. And of course I realized that although I was steeped in hospital medicine and research, the determinants of our health are largely social. Were you born in poverty? Did you have a good education? Was there transport around? Were your parents addicts? Did they work or were they unemployed? All those things which matter so much to what happens to us subsequently. And I thought perhaps I hadn't been such a good doctor sitting in my clinic being really concerned with the medical diagnosis. I wish in fact I'd added in much earlier that which was related to whether people were in work, not just were they in work, but were they in good work, and was the workplace a good workplace with the right culture. So that's how I got into this area. Now this looks a really hideously busy slide, but I wanted you to get an idea of the breadth of if you like, the things I've been interested in the last, well, since 2005. We'll forget at the moment the bits this end, which is about school and university, because I didn't start there. I started working in a review for the government on what were the barriers to people being in work. Why did they take sickness, absence? Why did they often move on out of that area where it says work and sickness, absence, which is at least when they had a job? Why did they move on into that second square where it's the work capability assessment that they would have to go through and often permanently into our benefit system? I don't want to get into all the ins and outs of the benefit system, and of course now it's universal credit, but the black arrow that goes along at the top says too few drivers in the journey keeping people in work. My work over the last few years has been trying to take that wretched arrow back the other way. I saw far too many people who often had mental health problems, leaving work, going into a system where there was very little hope, where they were often going to be isolated and lonely, when actually it would have been possible to have enabled them to return into work. So I've done work on all of those areas, but in the more recent years, I've wanted to add in, I certainly don't know as much about it, the years that involve school and mental health within our school children, having been a trustee of a big school for many years. I was very aware of the mental health problems, and then once I went to Cambridge, it really was so obvious to me that year on year we were putting in more support for our students who absolutely needed more support. But I felt that very often they came to us from school already having problems, which we of course were never told about because they might not have got a place, or they thought they wouldn't get a place, which in actual fact would not have been true, but they thought that telling us that they had a mental health problem was something that would stand against them. But in fact you absolutely need to encourage openness. And that is largely due to the top of the house, whether it's the CEO of a company or the head of a university. These things have to become things you destigmatize and you are prepared to talk about. So that's been the scope of my work. So I suppose I should say that my passion now, I want individuals to have good health, both physical and mental, and a sense of well-being, which I personally define as contentment, but that's a nice simple definition. Because I've seen too many people, and particularly work I'm doing now at the moment on drugs, I see too many people addicted to drugs who have no quality of life. And if you don't have purposeful activity, it's really quite hard to feel that life is okay. That activity can be all kinds of things. It often works, but it doesn't have to be work, and it doesn't have to be paid work. But what so many prisoners have said to me in the last 3 months, because I've visited quite a lot of prisons, is that they have nothing that they can see that they will ever do. Many of them could not read or write. Their educational attainments really made it very difficult for them. A job was an absolute dream. And they said they wanted something that was meaningful. And I think we all feel we want something that's meaningful when we wake up in the morning. And I really think this is a terribly important thing. I'm going to talk to you quite a lot about mental health in the workplace. But the factors that affect workers, and I will show you the sort of figures that go with that, the stress that you see in the workplace, poor sleep. I know I can't see very well, but could I just have a show of hands for how many of you sleep 7 hours a night? Oh, good, quite a lot of you. Excellent. You need to sleep 7 hours a night. Financial concerns and its effect on our mental health, harassment and bullying. But I believe a lot of those things are found in higher education, and some of them are found in schools. And I absolutely believe that this topic needs a joined-up approach. Some people think well-being is fluffy, so I thought I ought to have a few slides. I have 3, in fact, on well-being, because people thought it didn't necessarily matter. And when I first used to talk to employers about well-being, I think they thought I'd gone over to the dark side, because they thought of me as being more scientific. But I think many of you will know that, I think it was in 2015, this particular What Works Centre was founded, the Centre for Wellbeing. It's a collaborative centre. Its academic base is in the University of East Anglia, and it's really trying to put high quality evidence on well-being, and then to put that into the hands of decision makers, into the government. And it isn't just well-being in work. So it's well-being in our lives in general, in communities and everywhere else. And they say they try to bring pioneer thinking from across sectors to share ideas and solutions. For well-being at work, they see 5 drivers: health, both mental and physical, our relationships in the workplace, particularly to our managers. Do we feel secure and safe, not just physically safe? Is the culture right? And again, do we have something we think has got a purpose to do? So that is what this centre was set up to do. And they've published and directed us to a lot of studies that would seek the evidence for well-being being important in the workplace, and that one could show there was an evidence base. So if you look in on their website, you see evidence for better performance being related to employee well-being, as the London Business School, reduced cost, the cost of sickness absence, and presenteeism going down, presenteeism being when we're at work. But we can't work to 100%. We're just not there all together. We're either worried or we feel unwell and we can't really work to 100%. Cost of that is quite high to UK business, and also some evidence that if you have a sense of well-being, then you have higher creativity. And they've even gone so far as to say well-being is seen as a complementary indicator to economic indicators, so to gross domestic product, and how well any society is performing. And you can see there the types of things they would say what was all of a person's well-being. So satisfaction with work or the job, positive feelings about your work, and absence of negative feelings about the work or the workplace. It's taken me several years to really think myself through the slides here. If you see this continuum, on this side there's mental health symptoms, because remember, stress isn't a medical condition, it's a symptom. But that is the biggest problem in volume terms. Then you'll see musculoskeletal, they come pretty high, and in some industries like construction, it will be higher. Those two we should be able to cope with. We should be able to enable people to find the right help that keeps them in work, even people who have enduring mental illness, because they can be really, really loyal workers. People with enduring mental illness, if they have the right medication, are perfectly capable of being in work. And so many common musculoskeletal symptoms allow you to be in work. You then come to what I call the chronic medical conditions. So here you require more medicine, because it'll be rheumatoid arthritis, it'll be diabetes, might be hypertension. But again, with the right employer and the right clinical care, we ought to be making it possible for people who have disabilities of any kind, who want to be in work, to be in work. And then, of course, there are the conditions that make it extremely difficult to be in work once they get to a certain proportion. But even some of those are part of that illness may be possible to be in work. But then I've already mentioned the social determinants of health, and you have to factor those across these conditions. And then you need to think about poor workplaces, poor work, and poor managers. And I'd like you to try and think about that, not just in the ordinary workplace, but in a place like the university. Because our students come into contact with people who are employed, and if the people who are teaching them are either not mentally or physically well and not being supported, it's bound to affect the students. It can't be that it doesn't have any effect. And you can see it much more clearly, and it's been measured much more clearly in the workplace. And if you have those three things together, so if you are someone who grew up in poverty and didn't have a good education and cannot command a good job, and you have bad rheumatoid arthritis, and you're a bit depressed, and you've got a manager who doesn't treat you very well, you're going to have a big job staying in work. When I did the sickness absence review, a number of people who said to me, I hate my line manager, but that never appears on a sick note. Never will it be put on a medical certificate. What will be put is stress or depression. But these three things that I put on the slide, I think all factor into any one individual. So what I want to do is to look at real workplaces, and they're difficult to manage. And those of you in the audience who are academics will say that the survey I'm going to show you wouldn't ever meet any serious researchers' requirements, but we have very little that's ever been measured in the workplace. And I think you have to go to the real people on the ground and try and find some details from those who actually are in work. So I'm going to show you some of the challenges about ordinary workplaces. They are going to be mainly mental health, because that's what I'm talking about this evening. And then I'm going to show you some of the solutions that people put in, and in a way, how many people take them up, or even are aware that they're there, but we'll come to that. So this is what's called Britain's Healthiest Workplace Survey. It's now in its 7th year. It's open to any organisation or business. It's got an independent advisory board. The reason I know about it is because I chair it. The methodologies came from around Europe and the University of Cambridge. It's reported annually in a supplement in the Financial Times. 430 organisations, 150,000 employees, and over 2 million data points now. So we've got quite a lot of data points. But of course, it is individuals and companies filling the forms in themselves with all the risks, if you like, that will have. So an assessment by the organisation, voluntarily employees filling it in, that's the input, and the output back to the organisation is a report on the company or the university or the teaching hospital. We have quite a few teaching hospitals in here, and to each individual, an individual report, which is of course entirely private, and then a site visit usually happens, particularly if the organisation is not in the top few. I mean, we've tended to concentrate our resources on those organisations that have needed it. So that's the nature of the data collection. So I'm going to now show you different kinds of our findings. Now this one, it may be difficult to see at the back. This is looking at risk factors that impact upon productivity loss. So the average days per year, it's a cross-sectional analysis. It's about 98,000 distinct employees over 3 years. The really important thing is to look at the size of those circles. At the top are lifestyle risks, and you can see there the circles get bigger as you go out towards insufficient sleep. So days lost there, 6.4. And then in the bottom, it's those things that are mental health risk. That very largest grey circle is 19.1 days lost, productivity lost. because of depression. Next to that, financial concerns. So many people don't want to talk about their financial problems, but if only they were helped to consolidate that debt, and really they could go to work then with less worrying. You can see there 5.9 days, or nearly 6 days, to bullying. So that starts to give you a measure in a cross-sectional analysis of the sorts of things that matter in the workplace. But I also looked at it, could you change those risk factors? And if you did, would your productivity improve? Now, we had a lot of companies and organisations that repeated the survey each year. So here we're looking over a 3-year period at 7,200 repeat participants. So this is when the company or hospital has its report and it can see its risks, and then has been helped to put in some interventions to try and reduce the risks. And I just really wanted you to get the idea that you can reduce quite a lot of risk. And you can see it on this side. Put the biggest one at the bottom in bold black, I hope it's visible. No longer depressed. And there you see the change in productivity loss. You can gain back an awful lot of time and days if you know your numbers, and if you then put in your interventions to match the concern. So let's say if you didn't have any of your numbers and you thought that maybe you would put more of your effort into musculoskeletal reduction of risk, well, actually you wouldn't have as much reward as if you had concentrated there on depression. But I'm now going to go on and concentrate almost entirely on 2018's results. That's the year 2017 to 18. And these are just the overall results. But you can see from these, it's pretty awful that there's so much lost productivity due to absenteeism and presenteeism that you really don't need to start work until the middle of February. Because it's 35.6 days. That's the average. The best companies surveyed, Newnham, who have an excellent program for their employees, lost 18 days. And it was calculated that 55 minutes of every lost productive hour was due to being at work, but not working well, rather than being absent. So if we're unhappy at work, if we don't have a sense of well-being, then we're quite likely to be in that category that would be described as having presenteeism. And over 1/3 of productivity loss was related to workplace stress and lifestyle choices. And then they calculated what that would mean to the UK economy. So looked at in perhaps just a slightly different way, for 2018, 33% of drivers of work impairment were mental health. Then you can see the others there, which are either chronic conditions, financial concerns, or physical and lifestyle. So once you know that, then you can start to say, well, okay, mental health, what sort of mental health problems? Is it depression? Is it financial concern? Is it bullying? What am I really dealing with? And I always ask organisations when I go in there, and they must be very bored with me, I always say, do you know your numbers? Can you really tell me? And very often they can't. And then I upset them even more when they say, what are the 3 or 4 things you should do first if you want to improve mental health? And I think they expect me to say mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, massage, Pilates, but I never say that. I say these three things, and I say them to you tonight. If you really want to improve an employee's, and I will go so far and say a student's mental health, then the leadership at the top has got to care about this. It can't be ticking the box and telling somebody below them to go and do it. And that leadership has got to be prepared if they have had a mental health issue of their own to stand up and talk about it. That's been remarkably effective in the city. And then I know you won't necessarily have a board in a university, you probably have council, but departments will have perhaps departmental boards. But if someone on that board, and especially say with the university council, has to take information about the health and well-being of the student and staff body to that board, it starts to be important, because you can't run away from it anymore. And certainly in companies and in hospitals this has worked extremely well. And in many hospitals that use that as a mechanism, they use a non-exec on the board. And then, of course, I've upset my academic colleagues by telling them that they're managers. Very often they don't really see themselves as managers of people. But in fact, if you have people who are under you or you're teaching or they're researching for you, then you are a manager. And you do have a responsibility to know how to care for them as people. And this we don't teach usually. We just imagine that people who are elevated because of their technical skills will automatically be good managers. I sit on the board of the Cambridge University's Mental Health Students Project Board, and in the summer we looked at the report of our graduate survey and undergraduate survey, and I've never before seen so clearly, particularly from the graduates, what they thought of the people who were their supervisors and their managers. It really made me think of an ordinary workplace. So I think these things are translatable and they do cross over. So I would say, if you wish to improve mental health, these are the essential things that will make a difference, and they will support organisational culture of the right time, but they're so often forgotten. This is just looking at the 2018 survey. We asked some questions about line managers in this. So the question was, my line manager cares about my health and well-being, and then relating it to depression, two or more stress factors, or sleeping badly. And always the depression, the stress, and the sleeping was worse when the line manager wasn't supportive. So it's a crucially important relationship. And this research comes from the German part, speaking part of Switzerland, and Nicholas writes in German, so I'm sorry I have not read his papers in full, but I did ask him to share these two slides with me because I shared a platform with him at an OECD meeting. He's an an industrial psychologist, particularly interested in relationships in the workplace. So what he was looking at was the relationship between the line manager and those who he had under his care. So again, we could put that into a different context. And he asked the line managers, there was about 1,500 of them, are you well? Do you have a physical problem? Do you have a mental problem? Or do you have both a physical and mental problem? So you can see that there were some who really were very well, some with only physical problems, some with both, and fewer with psychological and physical. But then he asked the people who were under these managers, about their health and well-being. So the blue are the perceived percentage of employees with physical problems, perceived employees with psychological problems, and then those with both. And the truth was that those managers who were healthy had healthier employees. Of course, the relationship could have been either way, and you can't just say it's cause and effect, but it does tell you something about the relationship and the relationship that we need to build. So, mental health and its relationships. I've mentioned bullying, I've mentioned line manager behaviour, I've mentioned sleep. There is also a relationship with physical activity and also with obesity. So there are a lot of relationships. But as I say, I bore people by asking them, so do you know your figures? Do you know who are your most exposed group? Is it your middle-aged menopausal woman who's trying also to be a carer? Or is it the young person who's just come into your organisation who's trying to cope with the transition from college or apprenticeship into the workplace? Who is most at risk and exposed? And very often people haven't got a clue. But here again, we're back to our 2018, 26,000 staff employees in the survey. You can see at least in that cohort, stress was the most important factor in terms of their poor mental health, the 33% who had mental health problems. Depression also featured large and a lot of financial concerns, not so much bullying here. And then these figures will not surprise you, but it's quite nice to see them out writ large. I asked the analysts to look for me and see whether your depression, your stress, and your financial concerns and bullying, were they correlated with income and seniority. Along the bottom line, in case you can't see, low income at your left-hand side tend to 20k up to the other side to 150k, and then your symptoms of depression. And you can see in each case, those with the lowest income, the lowest seniority, had more depression, and then it comes down, more stress, not such a deep curve, financial concerns whistling down, and bullying. And then I asked about younger employees, and whatever you measured, I just put 4 here: depression, work-related stress, finance and bullying. But whatever you measured in this survey, the young workers came out the worst. Now, how do we know what would have been good to support them? Do we know what we should have been doing to enable them to move into the workplace and feel well and have a sense of well-being? We asked in this survey too, what did they use to support their mental health? Did they access mindfulness? There's a whole host of mental health interventions. But interestingly enough, the young people preferred to go to a friend, a family member, or the GP, and they didn't so much access support at work, so they didn't either trust or think it appropriate to go to their line manager. They weren't so much using the things that were available in the workplace. And yet, we want them to become sustainable workers and not to feel they're going to be dropping out. My dreadful slide where I showed you these people who do leave the workplace, and many of them do not return, and many of our more poorly educated members of society can leave the workplace and end up permanently in our benefit system. So, in this survey, these were the things that that people were accessing or not. This was what was on offer from the employer. So I put them all in a basket, and they include information, volunteering, resilience or anti-stress technique training, financial well-being, online various apps, EAP, cognitive behavioural therapy, physical activity, mental first aid. We haven't got an evidence base. Many of you in the audience will know that I can't tell you of a trial or anything that will say one is better than the other, because there's been so little research, far too little in this space. So which one would make a difference? Well, at least you should be measuring what you put in, so we can try and build up an evidence base. And who uses them? Does anybody use them? And if they use them, do they find them helpful? So here we are in this 26,000 total employee population, a sort of pale green. Access to mental health interventions. So about 67%, I think, of employees had mental health interventions. They had lots of physical interventions too. But awareness of interventions offered, that's the employee, only 25%. And participation rate, really low. So you can be offering things, people don't know about them or think they're not for them. They don't use them. But when they did use them, they did fairly well. So it really is, we have to get much better at trying to help people in the workplace with mental health interventions, because there's a lot of mental ill health around. But when we look to see the ones that people most like, so participation rate, and then effectiveness, mental health improvements. Interesting enough, there were one or two things there that I wouldn't have perhaps put the top of my list. Volunteering and charity work did very well, and massage and relaxation classes were also high on the list, and mental health training and stress management. So what can we do? This is particularly in the workplace, but I think again I would say you can move it over into a relationship where you have students, staff. You must know your data and your staff. You've got to do leadership, board engagement and line manager training. You need to know your challenges, and it's always good to ask the staff what they think would help best. We don't work hard on participation. We put it up on a notice board, and then we think people will come or they'll access it. Well, actually, you've got to work, I fear, much harder than that. And then you've got to collect your data. But I think if there's a message this evening that I'd like to get through, and I don't know so much about this, and I haven't done so much work in this area, I really see if you want someone to be well in work, both mentally and physically, and have a sense of contentment, which, as I say, is my definition of well-being, it really is a continuum. It doesn't start the day you go to work. It almost certainly starts in your first early years. But it certainly can be either helped or hindered at school, and it could certainly be helped or hindered in the university, where you're in so much of a transition. Yes, you are part student, but in some ways you're part worker, particularly anyway in some subjects. It's even more than that. My own medicine was very much more than that. And any world of work needs to have good work and good workplaces. Even though I'm no longer head of house at Newnham, I was really pleased when the University of Cambridge said, would I stay on their project board? And I'm very pleased that we are part of a project which Bristol is also part of, so I feel there's a connection there. And this is the Mentally Healthy Universities project, which mined in its regional officers is doing the actual training and organising it, funded by Goldman Sachs. And what really pleases me, it is a programme which supports both the staff of the university and students to stay well. You shouldn't do one without the other. It should be in parallel. And you can see they're wanting to create the right environments, again, develop the evidence and learning so that there is shared learning across the sector, and also to start to build those relationships further between the university and local mental health providers. So I'm very pleased about that. And as far as Cambridge is concerned, I thought I'd just say one or two words about that. This is the implementation plan that's gone to the council of the university, and it took us quite a while to get it in there, but I'm really pleased. It says to be successful, it is widely acknowledged by Universities UK that work on student mental health and well-being must take a whole institution approach. So we are very much at the beginning of our journey. I think we're probably earlier on than Bristol. We are very much at the beginning, but we are certainly now on the way, I think, to making it much better than it has been. And then just one or two words about medicine, because I have been interested in what's happened to our medical students in Cambridge, and this information is courtesy of the Dean, Diana.